الله الواسع ويا باب نجاة الأمة. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سعادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم جميعا يا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. أما بعد، قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين وأحسن القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم واعلموا أن الله يحول بين المرء وقلبه. To hasten the appearance of our 12th narrated Imam, recite with the loudest of your voices a salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, my dear Shaykh Shaywani, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The religion of Islam could be split into two phases. Number one, the phase which could be labeled as being vertical. And number two, the phase which could be labeled as being horizontal. That's when you examine the phase of vertical Islam, you see that indeed this phase was represented by the prophets. Vertical in what way? In the idea that it was a process of vertical revelation. It was a direct connection between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the prophets. Allah, for example, would send revelation to the prophets. Allah would send down the prophets as a mercy to mankind. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. As Allah comes and says, we haven't sent you except as a mercy to mankind. Allah sends a prophet down. A concept of verticality, meaning Allah from the skies to the earth. Yet then after the process of vertical Islam, you see that each Imam represented the phase of horizontal Islam. That no longer would the Imams receive inspiration or revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they would disseminate the revelation of the prophets in the way which they deemed suitable to their specific time. What do I mean? For example, Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam would take that revelation and he would disseminate it through the means of knowledge. That was the specific means that he decided to choose to spread Islam to his people. Because the people lacked knowledge, and that was the best way he was able to spread Islam. Imam Al-Kadhim, for example, would take that vertical revelation and he would practice it through dissemination, through patience. Imam had no other choice except to practice patience and spread Islam through that means. Imam Al Sajjad would take that vertical revelation and he would disseminate it through science. That was the means that he chose. To the extent that they say Imam Al Sajjad indulged in science to such an extent that they say at the tender age of 12 years old, Imam Al Sajjad disproved the theory of Aristotle. You see, because Aristotle has a theory, he comes forward and he says that the world is comprised of four elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Imam al-Sadiq at the age of 12 in Medina stood up and disproved the theory of Aristotle. He said, I'm surprised at a man such as Aristotle who comes and says that the earth is made up of four elements, whereas element of earth itself is made up of many elements: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. That Imam Sadiq indulged in science to the extent that he disproved theories such as the theory of Aristotle. He chose to spread Islam through science. Somebody such as Abu Abdullah al-Hussein took that revelation of Rasulullah, that vertical revelation, and he spread it in a horizontal way through sacrifice, through bravery. That was the means that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam chose You notice not every Imam was a fighter. Yeah, for example, Imam Al-Baqir didn't indulge in fighting. Imam Al Sadiq, Imam Al-Kadhim, Imam Al-Rida, Imam Al-Askari, Imam Al-Hadi, none of them indulged in war. Why? Not because they themselves aren't fighters. Otherwise, all of the Imams are fighters and they're able to do things on the battlefield. Somebody can say, what do you mean? They came to one of our Imams, they told him, Imam, متى يظهر قائمكم? When will your awaited one stand up and fight? Instantly the Imam would look at that man, he would tell him, كلنا قوامين. All of us are ones who stand up. Yet, we do what's needed for a specific time. It's not the fact that I don't have knowledge like Imam Sadiq, thus I'm fighting. No, fighting is what's needed. Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, he fought for the very reason because if he didn't fight, Islam's reputation would have been at stake. He couldn't indulge in spreading knowledge because if he did, Islam would have been erased from the globe. Thus, he practiced this means of revelation through fighting. Now the question that arises is, if Islam is spread into two parts, being vertical Islam, the process of revelation from the skies to the earth, which was prophethood, and Imamate was dissemination, not revelation, meaning it was a horizontal way of spreading Islam, what was the means of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam? How did Imam Zayn al-Abidin decide to spread Islam? You see, because these days mark the martyrdom of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. As you know, Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam was our fourth Imam. Imam Zayn al-Abidin was the first Imam to exist after the Battle of Karbala. As you know, our blessed Imam was there in Karbala. And he wanted to fight. Even narrations go forth and put it that Imam Zayn al-Abidin was once in a tent. And he turns to Zaynab alayhi salam. He says, "Oh Zaynab, I want to stand up and fight. Bring me the stick. I'tini bil-asa." She comes, she brings the stick. He then turns around to her, he tells her, "Oh Zaynab, bring me my sword." They bring the sword to Imam Zayn al-Abidin. Imam then stands up with the stick and with the sword. She tells him, "Oh Imam, why do you have the stick and sword in your hand?" He told her, "I have this stick so that it could help me stand because I am sick. And I have this sword so that I can fight for the message of Allah." Instantly Zaynab would go to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. She would tell him, "Ya ibn Rasulullah, Imam Zayn al-Abidin wants to fight. Could I give him the permission to fight?" He said no. She tells him, "Why ibn Rasulullah? Let him fight, he wants to aid you, let him die as a shaheed." He says, "Quickly Zaynab, go and remove the stick and the sword from the hands of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, lest the lineage of Imamat is severed." Meaning what? The role of Imam Zayn al-Abidin wasn't to fight. Imam Zayn al-Abidin had one of the most essential roles within the religion of Islam. You know, typically when we come in, we discuss Imam Zayn al-Abidin, we say that Imam was one who was always crying. For 40 years he cried about Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He had nothing else to do except weep and sob on the tragedy of Abu Abdullah. That he would eat and his food would mix with these tears of his. Yes, Imam Zayn al-Abidin was busy crying for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein's tragedy until the last moment of his life. To the extent that he was once in a butcherer and he saw this man killing a sheep. He goes to him, he tells him, "Oh man, did you give water to the sheep?" He tells him, "Yes, I did." He told him, "Give me a few moments in silence." Instantly he goes to the side, he begins to cry. He tells him, "Ya ibn Rasulullah, did I say something that offended you?" He said, "No, but I'm surprised that the sheep is given water before it's killed and my father Abu Abdullah al-Hussein dies thirsty." That you see, Imam Zayn al-Abidin remembered Karbala until the last moments of his life. Yet was that the sole purpose and role of the Imamate of our fourth Imam Zayn al-Abidin? No. Imam Zayn al-Abidin's role was the following. He noticed that in Karbala the people were beasts, haywan. The role of Imam was to transform them into insan. How did he do this? You see, because a human being is made of two parts. What differentiates me from an animal? What differentiates me from an angel? An angel is a soul, no body. An animal is a body, no soul. The human being is the only creation who's a mixture of both body and soul. Imam Zayn al-Abidin noticed that people were focusing simply on their body. They needed spiritual rejuvenation. What was the role of our fourth Imam? Spiritual rejuvenation. People were focused on their bodies. His goal was to introduce the soul. How did Imam introduce the soul? Through a number of ways. For example, through his character. Imam Zayn al-Abidin was known to pray 1,000 ruk'ahs. What was he doing? He was setting an example for the people. That now it's not the time of fighting. Now it's the time to work on yourself and uplift yourself spiritually. To the extent that Imam Zayn al-Abidin was known to pray 1,000 ruk'ahs. They would come to him, they would tell him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, your salah is unbelievable. He would say, I'm nothing like my father, Ali ibn Abi Talib. You know Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he's known as Dhul Thafanat. We send our salams within one of the ziyarahs, we say Dhul Thafanat. This is actually a poem written by Gradual al-Khuzai. He refers to Imam Zayn al-Abidin as Dhul Thafanat. Somebody came to Gradual al-Khuzai, he told him, oh Gradual, what does Dhul Thafanat mean? Why did you refer to Imam Zayn al-Abidin as Dhul Thafanat? He told him, Dhul Thafanat means the one whose knees tear open. He told him, why did you say Imam Zayn al-Abidin is the one whose knees tear open? He looked at him and he started crying. He told him, why do you cry? He said, I cry because Imam Zayn al-Abidin, they say when he would pray so extensively that even his knees will begin to rip open. Could you imagine? Dhul Thafanat. They describe the description of Imam Zayn al-Abidin when he was praying. They say his feet would begin to swell. Yet they would come to him, they would tell him, oh Ibn Rasulullah, your salah is unbelievable. He would say, I'm nothing like Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. Do you know Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen in the Battle of Siffin? They noticed that an arrow pierced into his leg. They would go to Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, salamullahi alayhi. They would tell him, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, your father has just been pierced with an arrow. What should we do? He says, go and take out the arrow when my father is in sujood. They told him, why in sujood? He says, because when Ali ibn Abi Talib is in sujood, he forgets everything. He's detached from reality. Take that arrow out and he wouldn't feel it. Meaning Imam was in a different state. He was in a different world. He was living in dunya, but his soul was in akhirah. There's a simple hadith which I'd like to mention, and we'll go back to the main point. They say our Imam, one day he was sitting in the masjid, and one of the companions comes to him. He tells him, oh Imam, give me a maw'adha, give me a word of advice. He looks at him, he tells him, Ad-dunya ahsanu ilay min al-akhirah. He told him, please translate. Dunya afdalu li min al-akhirah. This world is dearer to me than the next. They look at him, they tell him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, what do you mean this world is better than the next? This is the same world that Allah comes and warns us of. This is the same world that Allah comes and says, وَلَا تَغُرَّنَّكُمُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا وَلَا يَغُرَّنَّكُم بِاللَّهِ الْغُرُورُ. Don't be deceived by this world. وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَعِبٌ وَلَهُ وَلَدَّارُ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانُ. This is the same world that Allah is constantly warning us of. It's a dangerous world. How could you say that this world is better than the next? He describes his philosophy. He says, in this world, I am serving Allah. Whereas in the next world, Allah is serving me. And there's no comparison between me serving Allah and Allah serving me. Look at the philosophy of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, this world, I love it because I'm serving him. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam came with the same principles. His role was to spiritually rejuvenate the human being. Through what? Through supplication, dua. You know, it's unfortunate to say, many times you go to a center and they're reciting, for example, dua. People are talking, people are busy conversing, children are laughing, you see people text messaging. Yet the minute the lecture comes, everybody is quiet. In my opinion, my humble opinion, dua is more important than lecture. You see, for example, right now we just recited hadith dua tawassul. This dua, in my opinion, is more important than this lecture. Because a lecture is the lecturer speaking to an audience, whereas dua is all of us speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's no comparison. Dua in many of our communities has been undermined. We've lacked this ability to show the importance of dua. When you look at Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he came and he brought importance to dua, brothers and sisters. You look at somebody like his father. In the midst of the night, he stands beseeching his beloved. As tears flow uncontrollably from his eyes, he arises and shouts from the plunges of his heart, saying, Mawlai, Ya Mawlai, Anta al-Mawla wa ana al-Abd, wa man yarhamu al-Abda illa al-Mawla. He says, my servant, my master, oh my master, Mawlai, Ya Mawlai, Anta al-Mawla. You are the master, and I am the slave. And who has mercy on the slave except for the master? Look at the language. This was the master of believers speaking to the master of creations through the means of supplication. They say to the extent that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen one day leaves the house and he begins to walk towards the streets of Kufa. A man follows him. He says, what is Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen doing? He sees the Imam going in a distant land. He follows him. He says, Imam doesn't do anything except if there's wisdom behind it. Let me follow him. He says that the Imam begins to walk. I follow him. And I see all of a sudden that the Imam falls unconscious. I go to him, I shake him. I say, Imam, wake up, what's going on? The Imam doesn't open up his eyes. Instantly that man would go to Fatima to Zahra's house, he would knock on the door. He would say, oh Fatima, wake up, your husband has died. Imam Ali has left this world. Fatima Zahra would come out of the house, she would open up the door. She would say, oh man, why do you say that my husband Ali has died? He says, because I just saw him fall unconscious. I see that his face has went pale, his eyes are closed, I tried to move him, he isn't moving. She tells him, oh man, describe to me the descriptions of how the Imam looked when he fell. He says, oh Fatima, his face was pale, his eyes were closed, his body wasn't moving. She begins to smile. He tells her, Ya Fatima, why do you smile? She says, I smile because this is normal. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen does this every single day. He goes, he speaks to Allah. He gets intoxicated by the remembrance of his Creator to such an extent that he falls unconscious. This was the level of Iman of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. To the extent that they say Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib was one of the only people in history that you would be able to bring him silver and dust, gold and mud, and he wouldn't see a difference between the two. Why? Because he was connected with Allah. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam was on the same exact level. You see, because dua is the bridge between the creation and the Creator. Dua is what connects me with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, because today when you examine supplication and communication amongst different creations, you see that every creation has a specific way in which it takes to speak to its fellow creation. For example, within the world of animals. Animals have a special way in which they speak to each other. There's a special way of communication. For example, a whale speaks through whale songs. There's specific ways which it sends to another whale, and it connects to it through that means, whale songs. A wolf has wolf howls, for example. A dog may bark, for example. A bumblebee may move its tail in a way where it churns around many times, sending a message to its other bumblebees. That every single animal has a specific way in which it takes to speak to its fellow creation. To the extent that they say the ant has 20 different kinds of chemicals within its glands. Whenever it wants to say something to its ant, it sends a specific chemical. For example, it wants to send a signal or alarm to its fellow ant, telling it that you should come to me because I have food. It will send a specific chemical. Furthermore, if an ant is in danger, and it wants to tell its fellow ant that it's in danger, he sends another chemical. That ant have a special way of communicating. You move on from the world of animal communication, and you go on to us human communication. Us human beings, we are intrinsically gregarious. Man is a social animal, as Aristotle once said. We love talking, and for that reason you find Facebook today is one of the most popular networks. MySpace, which I don't know, it's out. Facebook or MySpace, mashallah, it's lost existence, it's extinct. MSN, Hotmail, these are all different social networks which feed our gregarious nature. We love talking. To the extent that they say, the worst punishment that you could give to a human being is what? Solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is what? Is that you take a human and you separate him from any human contact. You place him in an 8 by 12 cube. He stays in this cube and he's neglected and indeed isolated from any social contact. That they once made an interview with a man who was put in the solitary confinement. They came to him, they told him, sir, we have a question for you. He says, go ahead. They told him, if we gave you a decision to be put in solitary confinement or in hell, what would you choose? He said, I would rather stay in hell. They told him why? He said, because at least in hell, there are some people I can speak with. That the worst punishment you can give to a human being is that you neglect him from social contact. We love being gregarious. But what's interesting is that an animal speaks to an animal. A human loves speaking to a human. We've understood the means of communication between the creation and the creation, but we neglect understanding the means of supplication between the creation and the creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ali Al-Mu'mineen, they once came to him and he made us understand what is the role of supplication and how it's the bridge between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This dua, they came to him. They told him, Ya Ali Al-Mu'mineen, what's the distance between the sky and the earth? People are expecting a number of miles, a number of kilometers, a number of inches. Instantly, Imam turns to them and he says 2 words. Da'watun mustajabah. An answered prayer. They told him, Ya Amir al-Mu'minin, what do you mean da'watun mustajabah, an answered prayer? He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't in some isolate land. You know, many times we have this idea, especially today in media, they depict the idea that Allah is some old man sitting in a distant land. Allah comes and says, by you saying, Ya Allah, with sincerity, you just bridge the gap between the sky and the earth. Da'watun mustajabah. That today dua has to be understood. Why? Because dua shows us the reciprocal relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, because within Islam, we believe that the relationship between us and Allah is a reciprocal relationship. A relationship of mutuality, not a relationship of singularity. What do I mean? Between Allah and the human being, there's a reciprocal relationship. Allah created us to show His love. And we exist to show our love to Allah. Allah without man would be an unjust Lord because He would have potential, He would have mercy, He would have love, and He would be expressing it to His creations. And man without Allah wouldn't exist. Because Allah is the one who created him. Thus you find there is a reciprocal relationship between us and man, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the human being. Christianity fell in what regard? They failed to realize that the relationship between us and God is a reciprocal relationship. God loves you, and that's enough. You don't need to show that love back to Him. This is a false ideology. They come and they tell you that God loves you. You know, today within Christianity, you hear love, 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 love. God loves you. God has mercy. He created you because He loves you so much. Okay, I realize this. I understand. Yet how should I show this love back to Him? They don't explain. They say if a criminal has the love of Jesus within his heart, he will go to heaven. If a judge has the love of Jesus within his heart, he will go to heaven. They fail to realize that the relationship between Allah and man is a reciprocal relationship. Man has to show his love to God, and Allah is showing His love to man. Dua comes in, expresses this ideology beautifully. Because Allah speaks to man through Quran, yet we speak to Allah through dua. There are a number of ways, by the way, that Allah comes and speaks to us. Many different ways. Typically, the Quran comes with 6 different ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses to speak with us. For example, number 1, through inspiration, wahy. Allah speaks to man through wahy, inspiration. You take the example of the mother of Musa alayhi salam. Allah comes and mentions within the Holy Quran saying, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ مُوسَى أَنْ رَضْعِيهِ فإذا خفت عليه فألقيه في اليم ولا تخافي ولا تحزني إنا ردوه إليك وجعلوه من المرسلين. Allah comes and says, we sent revelation to the mother of Musa. Allah is saying what? I connect with the human being through inspiration, through wahy. Furthermore, Allah gives us another example, that He speaks to the disciples of Jesus through inspiration. Allah comes and mentions, He says, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى وَإِذْ أَوْحَيْتُ إِلَى الْحَوَارِيِّينَ أَنْ آمِنُوا بِي وَبِرَسُولِي. Allah says, and I sent revelation to the disciples of Jesus to believe in me and my prophets. Furthermore, Allah gives us another example how He speaks to the bumblebee. You know the nice little cute bumblebee? Allah sends revelation to this bumblebee. He says, وَأَوْحَى رَبُّكَ إِلَى النَّحْلِ أَنِ اتَّخِذِي مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا. I sent revelation to the bumblebee to do what? To take honey from point A to point B. That the first way Allah speaks to His creation is through inspiration. The second way Allah speaks to His creation is through an angel. And the Quran comes and refers to this very clearly. Allah says, مَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَن يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا. Number one, inspiration. There isn't a human being that Allah speaks to except through inspiration. أو مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ. Or from behind a veil. Meaning what? Through a voice, for example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may speak to the human being through a voice. And this is how Allah contacted Musa alayhi salam, where Musa was walking with his family members, and he reached a specific place where there was a burning bush. Instantly he walked closer to that bush, he heard a voice coming and telling him, Ya Musa, inni an Allah. Oh Musa, I am your Lord. فَخْلَعْنَ عَلَيْكَ إِنَّكَ فِي الْوَادِ الْمُقَدَّسِ طُوَى. Take off your slippers, you are in the sacred land of Tuwa. Now some people, they come forward and they say that, does Allah have a voice? No, Allah doesn't have a voice. Because a voice is a characteristic of a finite human being. Allah is infinite, thus the infinite cannot have characteristics of the finite. People, for example, come and say when Rasulullah was going in Isra wal Mi'raj, He spoke to him through the voice of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Many times we've heard this before. Allah spoke to the Holy Prophet through the voice of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Personally, I would not consider a narration. This is what's known as a Shia crime. Shia crime is basically where we begin to elevate the status of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen over the status of Rasulullah. Many times we've done this. I remember actually I was just in one of the communities and I mentioned that Rasulullah is a very simple statement. Rasulullah is the best human being in the world and Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen comes after him. A man came to me when I finished my majlis. He said, excuse me brother, you said that Rasulullah is better than Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen? I told him, yeah, this is what Quran says. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are on the best moral standard. He's like, brother, this is incorrect. I told him, why is that? He told me, they're equal. Imam Ali and Rasulullah are on the same level. I told him, seriously? What's your proof? He told me, one day Rasulullah was in Mi'raj and Allah spoke to him through the voice of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I told him, MashaAllah. I told him, brother, where did you hear this from? He's like, what do you mean? All of our mulams have been mentioning this. For my whole life, I've been hearing that Allah spoke to the Holy Prophet through Ali ibn Abi Talib. I looked at him, I told him, brother, whenever you hear such a statement, I want you to do one thing. Go to that respected scholar and tell him, please substantiate what you said by Quran. Allah comes and makes it very clear that the status of Rasulullah is on a different level, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, yes, is the greatest human being after Imam, after the Holy Prophet. Yet the only reason we love Ali ibn Abi Talib is because of his love for Rasulullah. That's the template, that's the measuring stick. I love a human because of his love towards the Prophet. If Ali ibn Abi Talib had no connection with the Holy Prophet, there would be no value in him as a human being. Someone comes and says, no, you're exaggerating. Allah comes and makes it very clear. He says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرِ. Indeed, in Rasulullah, for you is the best of moral standards. I love Ali ibn Abi Talib because of his love for Rasulullah. Thus, this whole ideology of Allah speaking to the Holy Prophet through the voice of Ali ibn Abi Talib is a fallacy and is a fabricated hadith in itself. That number two, Allah speaks to insan through a voice. Allah may speak to insan through an angel. Allah then may speak to insan even through what? Scripture, through the Holy Quran. That yes, Allah speaks to insan through a number of ways, as mentioned within the verse that I quoted. Yet then we speak to Allah. Yes, Allah speaks to us in a number of ways. Yet there is a specific way which we speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is known as dua, supplication. And for that reason, if I want to connect with Allah, I want to build that relationship. I want to foster a warmth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not a cold relationship. You know, many times we have cold relationships with God. The relationship is there. I'm not going to tell you it's not there. But it's a cold relationship. Meaning, It's a ritualistic relationship. We'll pray, we'll stand up, but there isn't that warmth, that love, that eagerness to pray. You know, look at, for example, how Imam Hussein alayhi salam treated Salah on the 10th of Muharram. He stopped everything. He stopped his battle. He said it's time for Salah. And even Imam Amir al-Mu'minin, he did this in the Battle of Siffin, where you find that it came time for Salah. A man came to him, he told him, "Oh Imam Amir al-Mu'minin, it's the time for Salah." He told him, "What do you mean Salah? We have no time for Salah. Imam, we're in the middle of war. Salah?" Instantly the Imam turns to him. He tells him, "Isn't it not for Salah that we are fighting?" But yes, fighting is crucial. But I fight to keep the message of La ilaha illallah alive. I fight to keep the Salah alive. That many times we don't have that same eagerness as the Blessed Imam for Salah. I remember actually, and I mentioned the story in the Q&A that we had. I remember as a youngster, I would always run away from Salah. My dad would come to me, "Ali, wake up for Salah, Ali, wake up." I would run away. Instantly, what would happen is that he would come to the door. He would say, "Ali, wake up for Salah." I would say, "Allahu Akbar," and I would jump back in bed. You see, it's a big problem when you begin to try to deceive your father. What would I do? I would come to him, I would tell him, "Baba, how many times does Allah speak about sabr within the Holy Quran? وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ." He would say, "Ali, use your verses for your lectures, not to come and prove me wrong." So what you find is that Salah sometimes becomes something secondary. You don't have that eagerness for Salah. Dua builds that warmth within our hearts. Dua comes and gives that stronger connection between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now somebody may come and ask a number of questions. What exactly is dua? Is dua simply that I sit down and I pick up this dua and I begin to speak to Allah? No. There's a science behind dua. There's a philosophy behind dua. Dua is not only me speaking to Allah. There's a number of definitions for what dua actually is. On the first level, dua is me as a human being reaching a state of self-discovery. You see, because when you look at dua, a dua is made up of two parts. The words of the infallible, meaning such as Imam Zain al-Abidin, and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Quran is the words of Allah. Hadith is the word of the infallible. Dua is a mixture of both the words of Allah and the words of the infallible. That when I'm reciting this dua, I'm not only supposed to be reciting it as a ritual, I'm supposed to be reciting it and contemplating on this dua. I repeat this dua until I become it. Somebody says, "What do you mean until you become it?" You take somebody such as Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi alayhi. You know, Imam Khomeini, they say every alim that we have in our world today, for example, Ayatollah Ha'iri, Ayatollah, for example, Sistani, Ayatollah, for example, all of the ulama that we have in our world today, each alim has a specific word which he always repeats. For example, they say the word of Ayatollah Khomeini was, "Ya mutajabbir." He would always repeat, "Ya mutajabbir, Ya mutajabbir, Ya mutajabbir." Oh great one, oh great one, oh great one. Why does he always repeat Ya mutajabbir? Because he repeats Ya mutajabbir until he himself becomes mutajabbir, until he becomes a great person. Somebody who lacks love should always repeat Ya wadud, Ya wadud, Ya wadud. Everybody could choose a different word depending on their own circumstances. I, for example, lack confidence. I would always say Ya Alim, Ya Alim, Ya Alim. Oh great one, oh great one. I repeat Ya Alim until me myself, I become Alim. And this was the secret of Ahlul Bayt. They would always repeat the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes of the names of Allah, until they themselves became the attribute. And I mentioned this in previous nights. That on the first level dua is that I repeat it, I repeat it, I repeat it until me myself, I become a reflection of that dua. Number one, dua is a means towards self-discovery. On the second level, dua is a form of rejuvenation for the heart. You see, because Allah comes within the Holy Quran and He speaks about qaswatil qalb, hardness of the heart. Many times the heart of the human being could be a piece of brick. It could be so hard that he commits a sin, he not only feels guilty, he not only doesn't feel anything, but he feels excited. Because there are three different things that could happen to you if you commit a sin. On the first level, I commit a sin and I feel guilty. that shows that the heart is still alive. There's still some energy in this heart. On the second level, I may commit a sin, but I may feel nothing. My heart has become hard, and I feel nothing in this heart. Yet on the third level, which is the most dangerous, is that I commit a sin and I feel excited. You see, some people, they commit a sin, and he's excited. He misses Salat al-Subh, he says, yes, Alhamdulillah, I miss Salat al-Subh. See, that's a big problem. If you commit the sin and you feel excited, that's a sign of qaswat al-qalb, the hard heart. The heart has become hard. Allah comes and refers to the Holy Quran. He speaks about a live heart and a dead heart. For example, ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, and indeed their heart has become hard. Yet then Allah comes and speaks about the qualities of a live heart. I want to know, is my heart live or is my heart dead? Allah comes and mentions within the Holy Quran. He gives the qualities of a dead or live heart. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهِ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Allah says, indeed the believers are those that when the signs of Allah are recited to them, their heart begins to bounce. I mention an ayah, your heart begins to bounce. You know, there's some fascinating people in this world. You begin to recite majlis, right away he begins to cry. Some people, you may recite, for example, from day 1 until day 10. You're lucky if one tear falls down. Other people, you recite, right away he begins to sob and cry as if you're not reciting the musibah of Abu Abdullah, as if you're reciting the musibah of his dad. He has that love for Imam Hussein. Allah comes and says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. Indeed the believers are those that when you recite to him the signs of Allah, his heart begins to palpitate. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Allah, number one, says that his heart begins to palpitate. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. And when the verses of Allah are recited to him, he increases in iman. That dua comes and brings that life back to my heart. Sometimes the heart could be hard. There are a number of things that makes the heart hard. For example, sitting with the rich. Imam Ali Ibn Abi Talib says, sitting with the rich kills the heart. Now, of course, there are some people, they are rich and they give this money for Allah. يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ. They give money for Allah. Those rich people, Allah is not referring to. But then you find rich people who talk nothing about their richness. Right? There are some people, they're rich, and all he talks about is his richness. Imam Amir al-Mu'min comes and says that these people, stay away from them because they kill the heart. Number 2, Imam says what kills the heart is extensive laughing. You know, sometimes you see brothers, they're always laughing. Laughing is beautiful. I promise, it's something beautiful. It's one of the secrets for success. They say one of the secrets for success is always smile, laugh. People are attracted towards people who have that positive aura surrounding them. Yet the Imam says, when you're always laughing, there's a big problem. In the majlis, he's laughing. He's doing matat, he's laughing. He's supposed to be crying, he's laughing. Imam says that laughing kills the heart. Al-dhahik, laughing. Imam then says, what else kills the heart? And this one may be kind of controversial. Sitting with females, right? Now, of course, there are some, I don't want to be kicked out of the center, inshallah, but this is what Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says, and let me put it in context quickly. He says sitting with females, in what way? Females who are known to constantly backbite. You see, because Fatima Zahra was a female, and yet she's the greatest of females. That whenever she would walk into a room, Rasulullah would stand up for respect for her. For example, Imam says, whenever I walk into the house, I'm filled with wounds from Badr, from Uhud, from Khandaq, from Hunayn. I see Fatima, I forget all of these wounds. That was a female. Yet there are some females that when you sit with them, you hear backbiting, for example, you hear gossip. Imam comes and says, stay away from these kind of females. Why? Because they kill the heart. Also, something else that the Imam comes and mentions that kills the heart is eating too much. Eating kills the heart. Eating is good. Many times eating is something that's needed, absolutely. But many times eating is something that people do always. You know, I remember even, I would have some friends, mashallah, you always see something in the mouth. Either a Twizzler, or a piece of gum, or a Twix bar. Mashallah, he's always eating something. I don't, Habibi, when was the last time I saw your mouth not moving? He says, I don't know. That too much food kills the heart, and typically people who are always eating are people who are depressed. They come and they give one of the qualities of a depressed person. He's always trying to substantiate and fill that void within his heart with eating. Another thing that the Imam comes and says that kills the heart is not only sinning, but ذنب على ذنب, sin upon sin. You see, sometimes I commit a sin and I stop. But there are some people, they commit a sin and they commit a sin right away on top of the injury. It's like, for example, I have a cut on my hand. Sometimes I have a cut and I wait for it to heal. Yet there are other people that he has a cut on his hand and instantly gets another cut on the same exact spot. This is digging a deeper wound within his arm, within his hand. Imam comes in and says, sin kills the heart. Yet what also kills the heart even further is ذنب على ذنب, sin upon sin. Dua comes and brings life back into the heart. It's an electrifier, it's an igniter. That on the second level, dua is something that brings life back to the heart. That's why the verse I began with, what does Allah saying? He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, istajibu lillah, wa lirrasuli idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. O you who believe, reply to the call of Allah, to that which brings you life. When I reply to the call of Allah through dua, this is bringing life back to me as a human being. Now somebody may come and ask a question, brother, many times I've done dua, but Allah never answers it. I'm screaming, I'm crying. Why? There are a number of conditions for my dua to be answered, and indeed for this dua to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first condition for my dua to be answered by Allah is that this dua has to be sent to somebody who you know. What do I mean? They came to Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, they told him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I'm doing dua, Allah is never answering it. Why? They say that the Imam would look at this man, he would tell him, إِنَّكَ تَدْعُو مَنْ لَا تَعْرُفُ. You are doing dua to somebody who you don't know. You don't know Allah. He says, what do you mean I don't know Allah? You know, sometimes we send an email and we send it to the wrong address. It comes back saying return to sender. Or many times you send an envelope to somebody, you put the wrong address, it gets sent back to you saying return to sender. Many times we are sending an email to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah comes and sends it back. He says, you don't know who you're speaking to. How do you expect me to answer this dua? That when I speak to Allah, I have to have this simple understanding of who exactly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. They say one of the etiquettes of dua is that I sit down and I tell myself, I'm speaking to my Creator. I'm speaking to the one who created me. I'm speaking to the one who gave me life. I'm speaking to the one who gave me these eyes. I'm speaking to the one who gave me this very mouth that I'm speaking with. I'm speaking to the one who gave me the ability to be standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That I make clear to myself, who is this man that I'm sending this message to? Or indeed, who is that Lord that I'm sending this message to? That on the first level, Allah comes and says, for this dua to be answered, you have to know who you're sending it to. On the second level, some people say, brother, I know who I'm sending this email to, yet it's not getting answered. Why? Very simply, there are barriers between us and Allah. Many times we send an email to Allah, yet there are barriers between us and Him, which are stopping this dua and impeding it from reaching Him. You see, for example, sometimes I may be in a basement and I'm sending a text message to somebody. I send it, I press send, it's not sending. Right when you look on the top, there are no bars. It says no signal. Sometimes there are barriers between us and Allah which are stopping that text message from receiving Him. Somebody comes and says, what kind of barriers are you speaking about? Jealousy is an unbelievable barrier between us and Allah. Arrogance, unbelievable barrier. Greed, unbelievable barrier. Within dua, Imam Zayn al-Abidin comes and gives us a dua which removes these barriers. That if I want Allah to answer my dua, that jealousy has to be taken out. How do I expect Allah to come into a heart which coincides with the existence of jealousy, arrogance? One of the most essential du'as of Imam Zayn al-Abidin is the following dua, where he says, Allahumma tahhir qalbi min al-nifaq. He says, oh Allah, rid my heart from hypocrisy. وَعَمَلِي مِنَ الرِّيَاءِ, and my actions from self-conceit. وَلِسَانِي مِنَ الْكَذِبِ, and my tongue from lying. فَإِنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي تخفي الصدور. Indeed, O Allah, you know what's in my heart, so please remove it for me. Look at the words of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. He says, Allahumma tahhir qalbi min al-nifaq. Oh Allah, rid my heart from hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is what? Public and private are parallel. You see, some people, in public, he is Ali ibn Abi Talib. In private, he's a Muawiyah. You see, Muawiyah, what's so interesting about him is that Muawiyah was smarter than Yazid. Why? Yazid, with all honesty, he held a level of stupidity, a very high level of stupidity. Yazid, in private, wasn't a mu'min. In public, he wasn't a mu'min. Muawiyah was smart. Why? In public, Allah. In private, he was a monster. He was a beast. Even when you look at Saddam in public, you would see him praying, but sometimes he would forget his shoes on. Why? I don't know. He would be praying in public. In private, he's a beast. He's planning to bring down Shaheed al-Sadr. You know Shaheed al-Sadr, they say when Saddam went towards him, he killed Shaheed al-Sadr how? He burned his beard first. He then took nails and he pierced it into that head, which was the head that came with numerous discoveries and scientific realizations. After he killed Shaheed al-Sadr, he then wanted to kill Bint al-Huda. Do you know what he did to Bint al-Huda? He did something that I can't mention to her in front of Shaheed al-Sadr. They came to him, they told him, oh Saddam, why do you kill Bint al-Huda and Shaheed al-Sadr? As in kill Shaheed al-Sadr and forget Bint al-Huda. He says, I'm not going to make the same mistake that Yazid did. You see, Yazid, he killed Hussein, but he failed to kill the continuation of Hussein, which was Zaynab. Saddam comes and says, I'll kill Shaheed al-Sadr, and I'll kill his sister Bint al-Huda as well. That in public he was praying, yet in private he was a beast, planning to bring people like Shaheed al-Sadr down. Hypocrisy, when we come in dua, and we say, Allahumma tahhir qalbi min al-nifaq, oh Allah, rid my heart from hypocrisy, we're saying, oh Allah, make my private and public parallel. If I am in public and I'm praying, and I realize that my salah is slow, yet the minute I go back home and I realize that the salah, mashallah, is 60 miles per hour, but in public, it's 20 miles per hour, there's a big problem. Allah says that's nifaq, hypocrisy. We continue with this dua. What do we say? Allahumma tahhir qalbi min al-nifaq wa amali min al-riya. Myself from conceit. Meaning, allow me to do things for your satisfaction, not for the satisfaction of the people. الَّذِينَ يَبَلِّغُونَ رِسَالَاتِ اللَّهِ وَيَخْشَوْنَهُ وَلَا يَخْشَوْنَ أَحَدًا إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Those who propagate the message of Allah, and they fear Him, and they fear no one except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We furthermore continue in this dua. What do we say? We say, Allahumma tahhir qalbi min al-nifaq wa amali min al-riya wa lisani min al-kadhib. My tongue from lying. Lying is what? There's one of the most powerful ahadith by our second Imam. He comes and he says, the dead person is no different than the liar. They came to him. They told me, Ibn Rasulullah, what do you mean by this? He said, what differs a dead person from a person who is alive is that the live person, I can place my trust in him, right? Like for example, I have my brother sitting down here, I can place my trust in him. Imam comes and says, a liar, you can't place your trust in him. Thus, he's no different than a dead person. When I lie, I'm killing my consciousness. I'm killing that fitr that Allah has given me. Within dua, we raise our hands. We say, Allahumma tahhir qalbi min al-nifaq wa amali min al-riya wa lisani min al-kadhib wa ayni min al-khiyana. And my eye from seeing the indecencies. One of the most common indecencies within our communities is when a gender looks at the opposite gender in a lustful manner. You see, if there's one hadith that many times we misconstrued and we mistranslate, is the hadith that comes and says you have one look. The first look is for you and the second one is against you. Many times that first look is 45 minutes. You don't need a second look after that first look. That first look, you analyze, you conclude, and you go and you summarize. That first look is dangerous. That's one of the what? The arrows of shaitan. One of the arrows of shaitan is lustful looks. Imam comes and says, a lustful look kills the heart. Not only does it kill the heart, but you should ask Allah to remove it from you. We say, وَلِسَانِ مِنَ الْكَذِبِ وَعَيْنِ مِنَ الْخِيَانَةِ. And my eye from indecencies. فَإِنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. Now somebody will come and say, brother, my heart is pure. Still my dua isn't being answered. Why? Because I don't have certainty that this dua is going to be answered. You see, brothers and sisters, when we do dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to be 100% certain that this dua is going to be answered. No doubt in the picture. Many times people do dua, yet there is lingering doubts at the back of his mind, telling him this dua may be answered, this dua may not be answered. The Hadith al-Qudsi, the divine narration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as in the Hadith al-Qudsi, are words of God which haven't made it into the Holy Quran. One of the Hadith al-Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and says, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنَّ عَبْدِي, I am at the doubt of my servant. Meaning, if my servant believes that this dua will be answered, then I'm going to answer it for him. Yet if he believes this dua isn't going to be answered, I'm not going to answer it for him. Allah works with us depending on the level of certainty that we have in His existence. If I believe, for example, I raise my hands, and I say, oh Allah, bless me a ziyarah of Arba'in next year. I have to be 100% certain that the minute I leave this masjid, I'm going to see somebody sending me a ticket in the email to Karbala. Somehow. It has to be that certain. Oh Allah, rid me from my sins. The minute I leave Muhammadiyah, I have to have this ideology that my sins are removed. I'll give you a simple example, which comes and exemplifies the idea that Allah works with us depending on our trust. There was once a man, he came to Isa alayhi salam. He told him, Ya Isa, I need something from you. He says, what is it? He says, my job is here, and my house is here, and there's a river in between, and it's very difficult for me to go in a boat every single day to this place. He says, can you give me a trick? Could you give me something that could allow me to get quicker to my destination? He says, yes. Take this paper, put it in your pocket, and the next morning, go onto the water. He says, what do you mean go onto the water? He says, just listen to my message, take it, and go and walk on the water. The man says that he took this paper, he put it in his pocket, and the next morning he went onto the water, he stepped on the water, all of a sudden he stood. He kept on walking. He took the next step, he stood. He walked onto the water until he reached his job. The second day, he's home, he goes onto the water, he steps, he walks, he reaches his final destination safely. The third day, he's going onto this water, something comes into the back of his mind. He says, let me see what's in this paper. He says that he took out this paper, he unfolded it, he opened it, and he read it. It says on it, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. He says, what? That's it? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? Come on. Impossible. This is giving me the power to walk on water? Right away he falls. He goes to his job, dripping water from head to toe. He goes to Isa. He tells him, Isa, what happened to your trick, buddy? What's going on? So what do you mean what's going on? He said, I fall in the water. I fell. So why? He said, when I was walking, I saw this paper. I opened it up, and right away I fell into the water. He told him, do you want to know why you fell in the water? He said, yes. He told me, you fell in the water because when you opened up this paper, you lost trust in it. You lost. The minute you lost trust in this paper, you fell. If you kept certainty in that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, you would have continued to walk on the water. Yet your certainty was lost, and thus Allah lost certainty with you. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works depending on our sincerity and certainty and trust in Him. When I raise my hands to Allah, I have to be 100% certain that this dua is answered. Oh Allah, rid me from sins. Instantly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will rid you if that dua is based on the level of certainty. On the third level. Lastly, somebody will come and say, brother, no, I'm doing dua, I'm asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure me, to do this, to do that, but Allah isn't answering it. Why? Simply for the reason that sometimes it's not in our benefit. Sometimes we ask Allah for something, but Allah doesn't give it to us. Why? Because it's not in our benefit. Allah is Hakeem. We are not the most wise. Thus Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not give us that which we asked because He knows it's not in our benefit. And that's why you find, brothers and sisters, when you go to the 10th of Muharram and you go to Karbala, you find that Ahlul Bayt were always doing dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Somebody like the mother of Ali Al-Akbar does dua, and instantly Ali Al-Akbar comes back. Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam is always doing dua. Right away, instantly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would aid him. And sometimes I think about it and I say, why aren't we taking advantage of this dua? Why? We have the opportunity. We have Mafatih al-Jinan. We have Bihar al-Anwar. We have the books in our shelves. Why don't we just go and remove that book, remove the dust from it, and begin to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Brothers and sisters, today the world lacks one thing. There isn't anything that the world lacks today except for one thing, which is that void of spirituality. When we see people like Whitney Houston dying, people like Michael Jackson dying, the greatest of superstars dying, somebody comes and asks a question, Heath Ledger, Batman, instantly he dies. Why does he die? They go to his apartment, they see pills. He's taking overdose of pills, drugs. He's addicted. I come and I ask the question, Heath Ledger is rich, he has the best of houses, he has the best of cars, he has everything that's amazing. Why is he dying? Why is he committing suicide? For one reason, because he hasn't made Allah a part of his life. Please, brothers and sisters, for the sake of Allah, let us begin to build that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let us begin to detach ourselves from this world and begin to see the realities, the haqa'iq of this universe. Allah comes and says, connect with me. You will begin to see this life differently. You will begin to see truth as truth and falsehood as falsehood. Black and white. Today, one of the biggest problems in our society is what? Society wants to mix black and white, haqq and batil, merge it all together, make it grey. Our master Yazid killed our master Hussein. Our master Muawiyah killed our master Ali ibn Abi Talib. How do you mix the two together? It doesn't work like that. Allah comes and says, connect with me. I set that strike between haqq and batil. You begin to see things differently. You begin to act with wisdom. Your decisions won't be based on your own personal desire. It will be based on the satisfaction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the key of the success of Ahlul Bayt. Everything they did in life surrounded Allah. Me as a human being, I'm sitting in this masjid. If there's one thing I should be able to take back home, let me begin to make Allah a part of my life. I'm going to a specific career. I don't know exactly what I should go into. Ask yourself, what would make Allah happy? I'm going to something. How could I cultivate that career in a way where I begin to satisfy Allah through it? That is the secret, brothers and sisters. Allah comes and says, connect with me. Ya ayyuhal insanu innaka kaduhan ila rabbika kadhan famulaqih. Oh human being, you are striving, struggling until you reach me. That the minute we begin to practice this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will begin to see us worthy of His blessings. That's why when we go to Karbala on the 10th of Muharram, we see that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam constantly indulged in this dua. Zainab alayhi salam would always be speaking to Allah. They say on the 10th of Muharram, the camps were split into two different sides. The camp that was busy, buzzing like bumblebees, the words of Allah and dua, and a side which was busy saying the words of shaitan and music. You know, they say when you go to Karbala, the camps of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein were talking and the camps of Yazid were talking. Yet the difference was that the camps of Abu Abdullah were speaking to Allah, whereas the camps of Yazid were busy celebrating their victory and their companionship with Shaitan. That on a night like this, you see that Abu Abdullah al-Hussein has left this world. Yet Zainab alayhi salam is a yatimah, is a madhumah, and indeed has no one else to protect her. Because as you know, after the death of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the horse would come back to the tents saying, "Oh Zainab, your master has died." The horse would act in a way as if it was sending the message that Abu Abdullah al-Hussein has left this world. Instantly Zainab would look at this horse. She would tell him, "Oh horse, lead me to that body." They say that the horse would lead her to a body which indeed was decapitated, blood drenching it from head to toe. Yet they say before the death of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Zainab would go to the body of her brother. She would begin to speak to it and she would begin to shake it, trying to wake him up. He was in the last moments. They say she looks at the body, she tells him, "Akhi kallimni bihaqq jaddina Rasulillah." My brother, speak to me by our grandfather Rasulullah. He wouldn't open up his eyes. She would once again shake his blessed body, saying, "Akhi kallimni bihaqq akhina al-Hasan al-Masmoom." My brother, speak to me by the tragedy of our brother Hassan, the poisoned one. He wouldn't open up his eyes. She would then say, "Akhi kallimni bihaqq abina Ali ibn Abi Talib." She would say, "My brother, speak to me by the tragedy of our brother, our father, Ali ibn Abi Talib." He wouldn't wake up. Until she told him one thing that opened up his eyes. She said, "Akhi kallimni bihaqq ummi me now, Fatima to Zahra. My brother, speak to me. By the tragedy of our mother, Fatima to Zahra. They say that the Imam would open up his eyes, he would look at Zainab, he would say, oh Zainab, you have cut my heart into pieces. What is it that you want from me? They say that instantly Zainab alayhi salam would begin to kiss Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam from his neck and from his chest. He would begin to speak to her, telling her, Zainab, close lights for this, my God. He would begin to tell her, Zainab, there's going to come a time where you're going to be taken as a captive to the land of Asham. You are going to be taken, I won't be there, Abbas won't be there, your father won't be there. You'll be all alone, you and Zain al-Abidin, the sick one. I ask you, O Zainab, in those times, be patient, practice patience and forbearance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say that when they took the bodies of the killed ones in Karbala to the land of Sham, Zainab alayhi salam was there with them. Yazid received the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He would take that blessed head, he would place it on the tray, and he would begin to take a stick and play with the lips of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Zayd ibn Arqam narrates, he says, by Allah, he says, I see those lips being played by the stick of Yazid. Those same lips were being kissed by the lips of Rasulullah. They say that in the last moments of the death of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, brothers and sisters, take your lands and minds to the sands of Karbala. I want you to leave this center and take your minds to the tragedies of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Everybody in this majlis wants to go to the shrine of Imam al-Hussein. Everyone wants to have the opportunity to send their salams to Aba Abdullah. Yet we say, oh Hussein, even though we are miles away from you, we send our salams to you from our hearts. And by Allah, Imam al-Hussein will never keep that dua unanswered. They say that when Zainab alayhi salam was being taken to the land of Sham, she saw the body of Hussein, the body of Abbas. She wanted to run to that body. While Zainab was running to the bodies, she heard a faint voice behind her saying, Amma Zainab, my aunt Zainab, have mercy upon my body. They say that Zainab would turn around, she would ask him, who are you, man? He says in a faint, weak voice, I am Zayn al-Abidin, Ana Ali ibn al-Hussein. Imam Zayn al-Abidin would say, Amma Zaynab, ودع يا خاك من على ظهر الناقة. My aunt Zaynab, farewell Hussein from upon the camel. I can't handle seeing you on the body of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. I am weak, I am sick, I have no strength in my body. It's too difficult. She would tell him, oh Zayn al-Abidin, then tell me what should I be doing? He says, Zaynab, send your salams from upon the camel. Zaynab goes back upon the camel. She raises her voice saying, Assalamu alayk ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu alayk ya ibn Rasulillah. She would say, Akha ya Hussein, how could you see me in this situation and not stand up and protect me? Am I not the daughter of Ali? Am I not Zainab? Stand up and protect me, Aba Abdullah. They say that when Zainab was sending her salams to Aba Abdullah, she saw an old man, some narrations put it, upon the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. She would tell him, oh old man, who are you? The man, they say, his hair was disheveled, his clothes were ripped and ragged, and he had no slippers on his feet. She would tell him, old man, I ask you, move from the body of Abu Abdullah. Don't harm him. He's dead. You can't harm him any further. They say that the man would look at Zainab and say, Zainab, I am your grandfather, Rasulullah. Zainab, why didn't you recognize me? I am Muhammad. In this specific time, Zainab saw Rasulullah. Yet there was a different time where Zainab was alone in the tent and nobody was there. All of a sudden, she sees a shadow coming closer to her. That shadow comes closer. She tells him, oh shadow, I swear upon you, please don't harm me until my father, Ali ibn Abi Talib, could come and protect me. The shadow comes closer. She would tell him, oh shadow, please don't harm me. Hussein is gone, Abbas is gone. أقسم عليك بالرب الذي تعبده. I swear upon you by the Lord that you worship, don't harm me. They say that the shadow keeps on coming closer to Zainab. She tells him, I swear upon you by my father, Ali ibn Abi Talib, please don't harm me. The shadow begins to speak, saying, Zainab, I am your father, Ali. No one is going to harm you. Zainab, أنا أبوك علي. I am Amir al-Mu'mineen. Zainab begins to speak to him, saying, أبا يا علي أين كنت لما ذبحوا أخي الحسين? She says, Father, where were you when they sat upon the chest of Abu Abdullah? Father, where were you when they cut the hands of Abu Fadl al-Abbas? Father, where were you when they killed my two sons, Mohammad and Harun? They say that the shadow disappears instantly. Ya Mu'mineen, this is the last night that we have. Let us remember one more story of what happened to Zainab after she left the lands of Karbala. They say that when Zainab came into the land of Asham, she saw a lady standing on the throne. She turns to her sister by the name of Kulthum. She said, oh Kulthum, do you recognize who that lady is? That is Hind. As you know, Hind was a previous servant in the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yet when Muawiyah heard that there is a lady of Jewish descent in the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he took that lady and wedded her to Yazid. Hind now goes to Sham. She knows nothing of that which happens in Karbala. You find that Zainab turns to Kulthum. She says, Kulthum, do you know who that lady is? That is Hind. They say that Zainab passes by the throne of Hind. Hind asks her, saying, oh ladies, where is it that you come from? Instantly Zainab says, we come from Karbala, but we originally come from Medina. All of a sudden Hind comes down from her throne. She says, oh ladies, you come from Medina. I know many people in the land of Medina. Zainab asks her, who do you know exactly in the land of Medina? She says, I know my master Hussein, I know my master Abbas, I know my master Sukain, I know my master Zainab. Do you know anything about these people? Zainab begins to cry. She says, oh lady, why do you begin to cry? Did I say anything that harmed you, anything that offended you? She said, no, but if you ask about Abu Abdullah, then there is his head behind me. And if you ask me about Abbas, then there he is without arms by the river. And if you ask me about Hussein, then go and find him. His head is in the court of your husband Yazid. And if you ask me, she doesn't tell me about Zainab. Tell me about my master Zainab. She says, I am Zainab, daughter of Ali. She tells her, my master going through. They say that Hind takes a rock and she bashes it upon her hand. Her hijab falls. Instantly she runs into the court of Yazid. She says, "Oh Yazid, how could you do that to the daughters of Rasulullah?" Instantly Yazid would look at her. He would say, "Oh Hind, go and put your hijab back on." She would say, "You are scared that my hijab is off, while the hijab of the daughters of Rasulullah is not with them." Zainab said, let us send our salams to Abu Abdullah with these tears in our eyes, with our hearts aching, with the love that we have for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Let us raise our hands and send our salams all together to Karbala on this day. We may not be in Karbala, but let us show to Allah that indeed our hearts are there with the shrine of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. As-salamu ala al-Hussein. That's not loud enough, brothers. As-salamu wa ala Ali al-Hussein wa ala Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Let us recite all together Ziyarat Ashura. This is one of the most profound ziyaras that we have. And indeed, if we ask Allah by the musibah of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, there is no way Allah will leave our du'as unanswered. Impossible. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Amir al-Mu'minin wa ibn Sayyidi al-Wasiin. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Fatimah sayyidati nisa'il alamin. Assalamu alayka ya khirat Allah wa ibn khiratin. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره. السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. يا أبا عبد الله لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت وعظمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام. وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات. فلعن الله أمة أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت. ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مقامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها. ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم. ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم ومن أشياعهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم. يا أبا عبد الله أبوان، يا أبا عبد الله والنور، يا أبا إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة. ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان، ولعن الله بني أمية قاطبة، ولعن الله ابن مرجان، ولعن الله عمر بن سعد، ولعن الله شمرا، ولعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتنقبت لقتالك بأبي أنت وأمي، لقد عظم مصابي بك. فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مقامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيها بالحسين في الدنيا والآخرة. يا أبا عبد الله إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بموالاتك وبالبراءة ممن قاتلك ونصب لك الحرب، وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس الظلم والجور عليكم. وأبرأ إلى الله وإلى رسوله ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانه وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم وعلى أشياعكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم وأتقرب إلى الله ثم إليكم بموالاتكم وموالاة وليكم وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناصبين لكم الحرب وبالبراءة من أشياعهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب وولي لمن والاكم وعدو لمن عاداكم. فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة وأن يثبتني عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة. وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله وأن يرزقني طلب ثاني مع إمام هدى ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم. وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عندهم أن يعطيني بمصابكم أفضل ما يعطى مصابا بمصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن آكلة الأكباد اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وقف فيه نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم لعن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية عليهم منك اللعنة أبد الآبدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فضاعف عليهم اللعن منك والعذاب الأليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابعا له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين all together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم خص أنت أول ظالم باللعن مني وابدأ به أولا ثم الثاني والثالث والرابع. اللهم لعن يزيد خامسا ولعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجان وعمر بن سعد وشمرا وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. We then go into sajda and say the following, inshallah. اللهم لك الحمد حمد الشاكرين لك على مصابهم. الحمد لله على عظيم مزيتي. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم الورود وثبتني قدم صدق عندك مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا وهجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Brothers and sisters, say in sujood, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for your hajat. Many mu'mineen and mu'minat around the world who are in need of our dua. People in Bahrain, people in Palestine, people in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and wherever they may be. Remember them in your du'as. That's all they have, our du'as. We mention du'a qamil, we say, وَسِلَاحُهُ الْبُكَاء. And his weapon is tears. Let us ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by these tears in our eyes and with that burning fire in our hearts to cure our sick ones. Remember all of them, inshallah. Go ahead. I tell you, brothers and sisters, there is nobody to ask Allah through better than Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Even Rasulullah will tell you, ask through Abu Abdullah. You know this Hind, I mentioned the story of Hind. They say this Hind, she was sick. Do you know why she became a servant in the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen? She was sick. They brought her to Imam Ali alayhi salam. They said, could you cure this Hind for us? She's sick one. If you cure her, we'll make her a servant in your house. Instantly Imam Ali would say, I could cure her, but I have a son by the name of Hussein. This Hussein, the water that he touches becomes a cure for the believers. Hind went to Imam al-Hussein, instantly he cured her. We have numerous stories of sick people, handicapped, who would come off their wheelchair and begin to crawl to the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, begging him, saying, Mawlai, O Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, you are Bab al-Hawa'ij, you are the door of needs. These handicapped people would go to the shrine, they will grab it and they will begin to cry from the plunges of their hearts. They would say, oh Hussein, please cure me. By the way, we're not asking about Abdullah, we're asking Allah through Imam al-Hussein. And instantly they become cured. Any problems that we have in our life, many people suffer from diseases, even if it's a spiritual disease, even if it's a psychological disease. People have, for example, inferiority complexes, superiority complexes, arrogance, greed. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Imam al-Hussein. Any problem that we have, please, let us ask Allah through the shrine of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, wherever we are. We're in our schools, remember Imam al-Hussein. He will never put you down, because indeed, he is Bab al-Hawa'ij. برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. And to answer our prayers and to hasten the appearance of our 12th Imam. As you know, brothers and sisters, this is my last night. I would like to sincerely thank all of the mu'mineen and mu'minat who put this program together. My dear respected Sheikh Shiwani, my brother Ali Sina, his whole family for being very hospitable throughout these nights. It was an excellent 3 nights that I had. If I had said anything that came out offensive or that was misunderstood, please forgive me. Everybody makes mistakes, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for the mistakes that we have done. It was my pleasure to be here. And hopefully, inshallah, I'll have the opportunity to be with you once again, to be at your service. بحق محمد وآل محمد. Let's recite Al-Fatiha before the loudest of your salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
Ali Al-Najjar, salawat